Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of Digital Fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and you thought spoiler season was over. Silly you, spoiler season never ends, not anymore it seems. Now, what we have today are not official spoilers, but we have some new leaked cards from Modern Horizons 3 that we're going to take a look at, and these happen to be 4 leaked Planeswalkers, which is kinda crazy. Now, each of these Planeswalkers is going to start as a legendary creature that costs very little. They're all very cheap, and they have pretty easy flip conditions, and then at that point they get exiled, come back onto the battlefield as their Planeswalker equivalents, and they're all just kind of crazy because they're so cheap. Before we get into the cards, I just want to ask, please hit the like button. It does help me a ton. It helps get this video out to so many more people, and without you guys hitting that like button, this channel would never grow. So to those of you that actually do that, thank you so much. It means a lot. It means everything to helping this channel grow and become a community. And speaking of community, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe. Hit that subscribe button because we have tons of spoiler content. We pretty much cover all the spoiler content as it releases as quickly as possible to make sure we get it out to you while it's still fresh. And we do a ton of deck tech stuff for standard. As soon as new sets come out, we have a deck tech every single day. And then we try to keep up that pace as best we can until the next set. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, make sure you subscribe, become a part of the community because we would love to have you. Now, without further ado, let's jump into these cards. First up, we have Ral, Monsoon Mage. This is 1 red and 1 for a 1/3 legendary human wizard. And while he's on the battlefield, instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. This is crazy enough as it is. Just a 2-mana thing with a decent toughness that makes all of your instants and sorceries cost 1 less. This is really good floor to begin with. But then whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell during your turn, you get to flip a coin. And if you lose the flip, he deals a damage to you, which is kind of a bummer. But if you win the flip, you get to exile him and return him to the battlefield transformed as his Planeswalker self, which is Ral, Leyline Prodigy. This is a 2 loyalty Planeswalker. When he enters the battlefield, he enters with an additional loyalty counter on him for each instant and sorcery spell you've cast this turn. So, if you're storming off and casting a whole bunch of instants and sorceries, and then finally flipping him, he's going to come in with a ton of loyalty and potentially be able to ultimate right away, so keep that in mind. +1 loyalty ability is until your next turn, instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, so he can still kind of get that ability that he had on his creature half if you devote your turn to it, if you're not doing the other loyalty abilities. Which is fine as the floor, right? And then -2, he gets to deal 2 damage divided as you choose, which means if you wanted, you could kill 2 Llanowar Elves with just this 1 activation, which is kind of cool. It's any targets as well, doesn't have to be a creature, so you could just shock the opponent's dome, which is also kind of cool. And then you draw a card if you control a blue permanent other than Ral. So if you're playing this in mono red, which you can do, you're not going to draw a card. But if you have anything at all that's blue on the field that isn't Ral, you're going to get to draw a card in addition, which drawing a card and splitting do 2 damage to any targets at all is kind of crazy as a -2. And you can do that as soon as he flips. You would lose the Ral, but if you even just played... No, you wouldn't lose the Ral. Because you had to play at least 1 instant or sorcery to flip him, which means he's at least coming in with 3 loyalty. That's important to keep in mind. And then that -2 isn't going to kill him, so you can use that -2 right away, even if you're not storming off. But if you are storming off with a bunch of instants and sorceries, and then flipping him so that he has 9, 10, 11 loyalty, whatever the case may be, you can do -8 as his ultimate, exile the top 8 cards of your library, and you may cast instant and sorcery spells from among them this turn without paying their mana costs. So what that means is, if you have enough spells to storm off for like 6, just at least 6, and then flip Ral, you can definitely storm off into your win after that, because he'll come in with 8 loyalty, you can minus the 8, and then get 8 more things to play for free, and just completely go over the top with Storm. And if your win condition is something that relies on Storm, you're probably drawing into it in those 8 cards, and you can just win the game outright. So this guy is really, really good under normal circumstances, I think. Let me know in the comments if you disagree with that. But obviously in a Storm deck where you can just flip him and go ham and win the game with his ultimate, he's even better. And bear in mind, all of those instants and sorceries that you're playing while you're trying to storm off before you flip him, they're all getting that cost reduction, so it's way easier to storm off. So I think even in decks that he's not completely built around utilizing like the storm and all that, he's still pretty good with his normal loyalty abilities. But then obviously in any kind of storm combo decks, he's just insane. So I don't know. If you agree, let me know in the comments. If you disagree, let me know I'm a schmuck. Anyway, moving on. We've got Grist, Voracious Larva. This is just 1 green for a 1/2 legendary insect with Death Touch. Whenever it or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it entered from your graveyard or you cast it from your graveyard, you may pay an extra green, and if you do, you exile Grist and return it to the battlefield transformed as its planeswalker. So even just a 1/2 Death Toucher for 1 is pretty decent, but the fact that literally anything can come back onto the battlefield from the graveyard and trigger this, it doesn't even have to be just the Grist, is pretty nuts. It's pretty easy to just, you know, self-mill a creature into the graveyard, and you can use some of the cheaper Reanimator spells. You don't have to necessarily go for the big stuff. You could do a spell that, you know, there's a couple different spells for 1 to 3 mana that can reanimate low-cost things from the graveyard directly onto the battlefield. Super easy to grab Grist or whatever creature lands in your graveyard and just get to flip Grist super quick. If there's any other ways you can think of flipping Grist super quick, let me know in the comments, because I'm sure there's plenty of stuff when you start to dig really deep into Magic's history. But when you do flip him, he becomes Grist the Plague Swarm. This is a 3 loyalty planeswalker. He can uptick to make a 1/1 black and green insect creature token, and you mill 2 cards, which is important because the kind of deck this guy's going to want to be in, that's going to be an effective part of this ability. You also put a Death Touch counter on a token if a black card was milled this way, which is just insanely good gravy. That 1/1 could get the Death Touch token, Death Touch counter, and then be a very good blocker that helps you survive until the next turn, and maybe that's when you do all your crazy stuff. So pretty good uptick there. -2, you get to destroy any artifact or enchantment, which is kind of nuts. It's like paying 1 green mana to flip this guy and destroy an artifact or enchantment is super cheap, and then it also leaves behind the planeswalker. So this is an easy way of having just like artifact and enchantment hate in your, you know, graveyard deck, graveyard reliant, graveyard reanimator, whatever the deck is. Insidious Roots is kind of crazy with this card too, so really any deck that's focusing on the graveyard is going to love this guy. Being able to get this like kind of free artifact or enchantment hate is nuts. But then the ultimate here is -6 for each creature card in your graveyard. You create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 1/1 black and green insect. So all of the ETB abilities or keyword abilities, all that stuff still sticks on these tokens, even though they're only 1/1s. And if they have any built-in way of scaling, the fact that they become 1/1 insects won't matter that much because they'll scale up from their own ability. So all of those kinds of creatures are going to be that much more effective with this ultimate. But being able to swarm the board with little copies of all of your best creatures in some scenarios is just going to be absolutely absurd. So if you can think of any of those scenarios specifically where that ultimate's going to be gnarly as hell, let me know in a comment, because if we can start getting some discussion going about the best place for Grist to fit in, I just think it's a really cool card and it deserves a home. So let me know. But we're moving on to Tamiyo, Inquisitive Student. 1 blue for a 0/3 legendary creature, Moonfolk Wizard, not Merfolk. When I made this short earlier, I accidentally said Merfolk because I was trying to rush it out to everybody on the channel. But 0/3 flyer for 1. Whenever Tamiyo Inquisitive Student attacks, you investigate. So you, even though it's a 0/3, it can still attack, right? It can be a really good early blocker for 1 mana, block in the air, have 3 toughness, stop the early aggression, stop a Ragavan or whatever. But then you can also attack with it, and even though it's not going to deal any damage, you just get to make clue tokens when you swing. So if you don't need to hold it back as a blocker, you just get free clue tokens with it every turn. So all of that is kind of good on its own. It's not anything crazy, but it's super good value for a 1-drop. But then when you draw your 3rd card in a turn, You exile Tamiyo and return her to the battlefield transformed under her owner's control. It is so easy to draw a second and third card. You got to remember, the first card you draw in your draw step is going to count. So you could just chart a course and flip this. Or my pick for older formats would be Brainstorm. You play 1 mana Brainstorm, you're drawing 3 right off of it and flipping it, right? So you could even do that on your opponent's turn. You could flip her on your opponent's turn. You could leave her up, let your opponent target her with something, and then instead of having to worry about her being removed, you just play Brainstorm, draw 3, put 2 back on top of your library, and flip her. And now if their removal was only creature based, it just fizzles because she's a planeswalker. And then you get to untap and use her as a planeswalker. And you can do that super early, like turn 2. So I think she's just crazy. So anyway, when you do draw your third card in a turn, you get to flip her. She becomes Tamiyo Seasoned Scholar. 2 loyalty legendary planeswalker Tamiyo. Plus 2 loyalty, and until your next turn, whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, it gets -1/-0 until end of turn. So nice little bit of extra value to like buy you a turn, reduce your opponent's aggression, because maybe that next turn is the one you need to just like completely go off the rails with value or a combo win or whatever. You can -3 to return an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. And if it's a green card, you get to add 1 mana of any color. So it's really cool that a lot of these abilities are working if you have the color she doesn't start as, but is included in her, you know, in her planeswalker dual color nature. All of the planeswalkers are like that. And so that's really cool. So if you bring back a green card, you get to add a mana of any color for free too. It's almost like she's a Mox Diamond, I guess, or a Lotus Petal or something like that, as well as getting something from your graveyard back to your hand, which can be super, super effective. And then her ultimate is -7, you draw cards equal to half the number of cards in your graveyard, or in your library, rounded up, and then you get an emblem that makes it so you have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. Since it's an emblem, you can't interact with it, so that never goes away, which means other draw spells are even better in a deck with Tamiyo, which you want to be drawing a bunch in order to flip her anyway. So she just seems kind of crazy if you're in just the right deck that's built around her. I'm not 100% sure though which Simic deck or Simic plus another color deck is really going to be the best home for her. So if you have ideas about where we can actually break Tamiyo, what she's meant to fit into the most, definitely let me know, because I think she's a crazy cool card. And I love the lore behind Tamiyo. So I'm pretty sure this card represents her origin, but right now, in the Magic lore, current events, Tamiyo is dead, but her spirit was kind of like digitized and lives on as like a digital copy inside like a scroll that was given to Nashi? Nashi. I think it's Nashi, right? The rat legend dude. So there's some kind of a lingering storyline there with Nashi and Tamiyo, and what's going to happen with Tamiyo's like preserved memories or whatnot. And is something going to happen with Nashi? Is Nashi going to do something with it to bring back Tamiyo in some way, or make like a new copy of Tamiyo? I don't know. But all of that stuff is stuff for the future. I do think we'll see Tamiyo again in some shape or form. Doesn't necessarily mean she's actually coming back as Flesh and Blood Tamiyo, but I do think she'll pop up as a card again eventually, and there will be a storyline that involves that. And I'm really excited to find out what happens with that, but that has nothing to do with this. I'm getting sidetracked, so we're going to move on. The last card of the day, Sorin of House Markov. 1 black and 1 for a 1/4 legendary human noble with lifelink. Also has Extort, so anytime you cast any spell, you can just pay 1 extra mana in either white or black, and if you do, you get to drain your opponent for 1, which is a nice little built-in ability on a pretty decent 1/4 lifelinking body for only 2 mana. So again, this is another creature that's super cheap, easy to get down, and even though it's not setting the world on fire, it's still a pretty decent little, you know, addition to a deck with a ton of value for the mana that you're paying. But at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, if you gained 3 or more life this turn, you exile Sorin and return him as his Planeswalker version. He comes back in as Sorin Ravenous Neonate, a legendary Planeswalker with 3 loyalty, still has Extort, so no matter what, you still have that ability to pay an extra mana every time you cast a spell and drain for 1. But you can +2 to create a food token. I'm having flashbacks to Oko, and it's terrifying. You can -1, and he deals damage equal to the amount of life you gained this turn to any target. That's really the best ability here. That's almost like, that's like the secret ultimate. It tries to pretend it's not the ultimate because Sorin actually has an ultimate here, but that's kind of the secret ultimate, but we'll get back to that. The actual ultimate, -6, you get to gain control of any creature. It becomes a vampire in addition to its other types, and you put a lifelink counter on it if you control a white permanent other than the creature or Sorin. It's worth noting, if the thing that you steal is white, you'll get to put the lifelink counter on it, which is really, really cool. It does become a vampire no matter what. So if you have other white in the deck, you'll get your lifelink counter no matter what, but even if you just steal a white creature, you'll get that lifelink counter. So kind of a cool ultimate. It's not like super powerful, but under the right circumstances, if he has enough loyalty, being able to take their best creature, give it lifelink and turn it into a vampire seems pretty decent in the kind of decks that would want to use Sorin. But let's talk about that -1. Let's go back to that. We glossed over it a little bit, but it's crazy. The thing you have to note is, when Sorin first flips because you gained 3 or more life this turn, it still counts that life for this -1 if you use the -1. So if you have Sorin of House Markov on the battlefield, and you just like gain 10 life in 1 turn, which is super easy for a life gain deck that's built around that kind of stuff, to get all of the triggers off of every time you gain life and all that. Just gain 10 life in 1 turn, and then he flips. He can immediately use his -1 after flipping that same turn, and he still sees that whole 10 life you gained and can do 10 damage to anything. So not only can you kill like their biggest threat outright for no mana, just doing the thing your deck is supposed to do anyway, but a lot of times you can just hit them right in the head. It's any target. Doesn't have to be a creature, doesn't have to be a planeswalker, although it's cool that it can be a planeswalker too. It can also be a battle, which is interesting. But you can do it right to the head. So if you gain a bunch of life in 1 turn, flip Sorin, and then -1, it can just win you the game outright, which is kind of crazy. But I digress. These cards are pretty nutty. You'll have to let me know in the comments if you think it's good enough to see play in a life gain deck. I certainly think it is. And if there's any kind of crazy interaction that I'm not seeing that you'd think would be good for this in a different deck that I haven't thought of, definitely let me know about that too, because there's just a lot cool going on with these cards, and there's so much potential for where they could fit into. But that is all of the spoilers for today, or I should say leaks. These were not officially spoiled, they were leaked, and we managed to get a hold of some of these images and clean them up for you as best we could and show you what's coming. Pretty crazy. Modern Horizons 3, I'm not normally a super big fan of the sets that are made for like non-standard formats. But this one's looking pretty fun, and the fact that it is coming to Arena is exciting. I'll definitely at least be drafting with it launch week and having a good time with that stuff. And who knows, maybe I'll build a couple older decks and put those up on the channel as deck techs, but definitely be drafting a lot. I'll definitely be covering all of the spoilers, so look forward to that. Set's looking kind of wild. With all that out of the way, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you like it so everyone else can see it and my channel can grow. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, again, so that you can become a part of the community. Make sure you never miss any of these spoilers the second they pop up. And make sure you don't miss any of my crazy deck techs, because Outlaws of Thunder Junction is in full swing. We've already got 3 new decks up on the channel, and there's more coming like every day. Really crazy ideas, stuff that is eviscerating the meta and stuff that no one else is really thinking of, and I'm really excited about it. So check that stuff out. Like, subscribe, do the thing, and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck techs, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below. do all the things.